It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Well, the first flotilla hostages are free, and most of them at least home, and with plenty to say about the sheer bestiality of the conditions in which they were held by our ally with shared values with us. People like us, you know, the Israelis, forced people whom they kidnapped on the high seas, utterly illegally, to drink from toilet bowls. And Candaceowens, a one-woman FBI, has completely debunked the whole of the FBI and their official narrative in the murder on camera of Charliekirk. And Donald Trump's peace plan seems to have run into the desert sands. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Almost 8 million people watched the mother of all talk shows in the last week. Compared to Bariweiss's free press, hundreds of times more of an audience. Yet Bariweiss was just paid by Larry Ellison, the second richest man in the world and a bosom buddy of Benjamin Netanyahu, £150 million to own the title of the free press. And she was given CBS television to run. Makes you wonder what we'd be worth if we were available on the open market, which we never will be. But it is an interesting tale. The takeover of what remains of American corporate media by the Israel lobby is so blatant, so obvious as to be laughable. Not only have they forced the owners of TikTok to give TikTok to Israel. Donald Trump said in the week he'd saved TikTok for Gen Z. Well, actually, he saved it for Israel, for Zionism, for Netanyahu, and Gen Z, which isn't particularly fond of any of those three things, will probably start voting with their feet. If I was a tech billionaire, I'd be setting up a new TikTok right now, because the vacuum that will be created by turning these corporate media and social media outfits into Israel Hasbara sheets, well, nobody is going to watch it. But I'm mentioning her to contrast her with Candace Owens. Now, I've never met Candace Owens. I've never communicated with her in any way. She's never acknowledged my existence. But I think she is on the verge of sainthood. She is indefatigable to the extent that she has now sent all of her material, all of her papers, to a list of influencers as a kind of dead man switch, because she too fears meeting the fate of Charliekirk. Single-handedly and with great fortitude and a great deal of skill, she has exposed not only the possible co-conspirators in the murder in plain sight in the afternoon, murder in the afternoon in Utah of the popular populist Charliekirk of TPUSA. She has established beyond any contradiction that Israel had a major motive for the disappearance from the scene of Charliekirk. Now, his friends, unaccountably, started off by denying that. And like a rope-a-dope, like Muhammad Ali against George Foreman in the rumble in the jungle, she let them punch away at her. And then she landed the knockout blow, just like Ali in that moment of epiphany down in Zaire, as it was then called. She allowed Charliekirk's best friends to allege that she was crazy, that Charliekirk hated her, that Charliekirk was with Netanyahu and Israel right up until the end, and then she dropped the nuclear weapon of the exchanges with Charliekirk and others, including some of the others who had been guilty of the falsehoods I have just described. She dropped the ultimate bombshell in which it is plainly stated by Charliekirk that he is being bullied and threatened by the Israel lobby, that they are withdrawing millions of pounds in dollars in funding from his organization, and that he isn't going to put up with it any longer, and that he is intending to withdraw from the pro-Israel lobby. So a motive is thereby established. Here was a man with the world at its feet, the conservative youth world of the United States, at least, though his influence went right across the English-speaking world and beyond that, also into the Spanish-speaking world. His mixture of conservatism, of traditional values, and of belief in Jesus, belief in God, had a very powerful, powerful medicine. Now, if such a man, with millions of followers, with hundreds of thousands of chapters, was to leave the pro-Israel lobby, could not take Netanyahu any longer, believed that Netanyahu was leading America to disaster, if he had acted on that which he said on the eve of his death, 2 days before his death, that would have been curtains for Netanyahu, curtains for the Israel lobby. No matter how many thousands they throw at social media influencers, no matter how many millions or hundreds of millions they throw at bariweiss, who is she, by the way, if they had lost the support of Charliekirk and TPUSA, it would have been curtains. Already, said Megyn Kelly, everybody under 30 hates Israel. Well, that was hyperbole. Not everybody, but those that didn't were followers of Charliekirk. And all of this, all of it, every last bit of it, has been exposed by one person, Candaceowens, who I happen to believe is sent by God. She's black, she's beautiful, she's married, she's a mother, she is wholesome, she is apple pie, but she is made of steel, a woman of steel. And she has borne the vicissitudes of the slings and arrows of the Israel lobby in the last few weeks with such elegance and such grace that to see her deliver these knockout blows is truly a joy to behold. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. And Candaceowens' search for the truth in the killing of Charliekirk will be a joy forever. May God protect her. But tie up the camel also, Candace. Make sure you've got better security than Charliekirk had by the end. More of that, I'm sure, with our guests in the rest of the show. But let me move on to the much, much bigger issue of Donald Trump's peace plan. Just a week ago, he was taking a bow. The Nobel Peace Prize was in his lap, it was practically in his pocket. He'd won it, he announced. And he was receiving the most bewilderingly diverse number of nominations for the Nobel Peace Prize, from the government of Pakistan to the government of Ukraine. Although they failed to actually pass the resolution in the parliament of Ukraine, not enough people turned up to vote for Donald. So they seem to have their doubts. But it looked like we finally had a ceasefire and the opening to the Gaza Riviera. We even had its board of directors named, headed by Donald Trump himself, with the chief executive officer based in his luxury home in Jerusalem, Tony Blair, the blood-soaked, spattered war criminal, former Prime Minister of Britain. We even had Jared Kushner looking at the potential bonanza of the real estate that they intended to build on the bones, on the blood of the hundreds of thousands who have been slaughtered there. It looked like a deal until it wasn't. The resistance in Gaza reluctantly accepted the bones, if you will forgive the pun, of the Trump plan as an alternative to complete annihilation and absolute ethnic cleansing. But that didn't make any difference. Netanyahu had already rewritten Donald Trump's peace plan, the one he agreed in New York with the Arab and Muslim leaders, gave it to Netanyahu, who rewrote it. Even that rewritten script is now running into the sand. The other thing that's running into the sand every single hour of every single day is the blood of Palestinian families, refugees, almost all of them with an entitlement to international protection. That's why the United Nations has schools there, has a food program there. That's why the United Nations has clinics there and staff there. I've traveled with them many, many times in Gaza and visited the United Nations installations in Gaza many, many times, making it clear that the international community has a legal responsibility to protect and sustain people who are, after all, resident in an illegally occupied strip, an illegally occupied piece of land that virtually every government in the world now recognizes, literally recognizes, with a capital R, as a part of the Palestinian state, first born in Oslo, in the Oslo Accords, later adopted by the UN Security Council as their property. But of course, if Gaza becomes ruled by Tony Blair and Donald Trump and becomes a kind of Disneyland for Trump and his in-laws to ply their wicked trades of gambling and all the rest, it will scarcely be feasible for that to be a part of the Palestinian state, leaving only then the West Bank, where the violence of the illegal settlers and the army and police that back them every inch of the way has begun to reach fever pitch. Towns, villages, isolated farms are all being occupied by force, their people driven out by force, sometimes maimed, sometimes murdered in the doing. So it's not looking great, Donald, for your Nobel Peace Prize, because it doesn't look like there is any peace coming in Palestine anytime soon. Certainly the heroes of the Sumud means steadfastness, the Sumudflotilla, which was illegally seized on the high seas, and hundreds, 500 people, some of them very famous people indeed, have now undergone their own Calvary. Those 500 were taken to the foul torture den called a prison, but in fact a murder and torture den for Palestinians cast into it, a place where very few emerge alive, and those that do come out completely unrecognizable to their former selves. These famous people, the most famous of whom was Saint Greta Thunberg, may God preserve her always, were taken into this prison, and it looked like we might never see some of them alive again. Mandela's grandson, our own Tadhg Hickey, coming up in just a minute. Yvonneridley, my fellow candidate in the Scottish Parliament elections in Glasgow in just a few months from now. Famous people, well-meaning people, saintly people, elderly people, like an old Glasgow lady of 70 who's now in hospital because of the severe dehydration and other maltreatment, slamming an iron door on her already broken leg, have now become commonplace in every part of the world from which these flotilla prisoners have returned. People suffering post-traumatic stress disorder from having been snatched at gunpoint in the night on the high sea when no one remotely had a right to take them, and then thrown into a dungeon. Greta, forced to kiss the Israeli flag, dragged by her hair, pictures of her taken against her will, wearing the Israeli flag, and multiple reports, including from Tadhg Hickey, who will be coming up in just 5 minutes, that the prisoners were forced for the first few days to drink their water from the toilet. It all sounds just like another day in the settler state, at least if you were a Palestinian. If this is how they treat famous Western people with powerful passports in their pockets, with powerful and important states, including states that are the biggest benefactors of their Israeli captors, this is how they are treated. Can you imagine how they treat the Palestinian hostages? For that is what they are. If the Israeli hostages in Gaza are hostages, the Palestinian prisoners are also hostages. If they're not hostages, then they're captives, just like the Israeli captives that Donald Trump boasted would soon be home But it's all, as I say, beginning to go sour. The governments of the West responded miserably to the theft of their own boats with their own flags on them, and to the illegal capture, kidnap of their own nationals. Some of them did better than others. The Irish government didn't do well, but it did a little bit better than the British, which actually arrested at London's Heathrow Airport many of the British members of the flotilla. The American government did so little that the American prisoners were virtually the last to be released. These governments, including the Australian government, have just demonstrated all over again that Israel and its citizens are more important to them than their own country and their own citizens. And speaking about the Australian government, my guest in the second hour is Chris Hedges, one of the finest newspaper men and academics in the world. In a sane world, he'd be working in the White House, if not at Foggy Bottom as the Secretary of State itself. Chris Hedges is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's the former New York Times bureau chief in the entire Middle East. Anyone in their right mind would turn up to see him, to hear him. And the Australian National Press Club seemed as if they wanted to hear him too. Certainly, he was booked to address the National Press Club in Australia until, under Zionist pressure, the National Press Club slammed its door on a Pulitzer Prize winner and the former New York Times bureau chief in the Middle East. You couldn't make it up, but you don't have to make it up. They're doing it for you, these heads of government, arses of government, not heads. Every one of them should hang their heads in shame. I'll be right back with Tadhg Hickey, just off the boat, in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
What a great show this is! I listened to it, I thought, wow, what a great show. I've called into your show today, George, because I'm a great caller. Probably the greatest caller you've ever had. I really am. The only way your show could be better is if it had more of me, Donald J. Trump, in it. You keep talking about me, George. You do. I've heard it. I have. So many of the American people, the best people, listen to your show. And I've heard them crying about me. I have. And I listen and I go, ooh, America, don't cry. Don't cry. You need to be careful what you say about me, George. You don't want me to put a tariff on your show like I did with China. And then you'll come running for my help, just like little Zelensky. You know, I know you will. I know these things. Make the mother of all talk shows great again. That's why we're here. That's what we're gonna do, George. We're gonna boost your ratings. Donald is gonna boost them bigly. I'm giving your show the Trump bump. You're welcome, George. Thank me. And remember, nobody talks like me. Nobody calls like me. And absolutely nobody ends a phone call like me. I'm hanging up now. Not because I finished, but because I won.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So here's our poll for this evening. Who should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? Donald Trump or Greta Thunberg? Well, it's your call. And 21,000 of you have already made it, and it ain't looking good, Donny, for you. But let's make it a bumper poll so that the Vox Populi can truly be heard. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, and on my X and on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and if you're one of the vanguard, the creme de la creme, on my Patreon, you can vote there too. And once again, they have voted in complete unanimity for Greta Thunberg. So Telegram, X, YouTube community poll, YouTube stream, or Patreon. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, please, a remarkable number of you watch every week on the YouTube stream, but haven't yet subscribed to my channel. Believe me, it will be helpful if you do. You can call the show. It's toll free in the United States and Canada. The number is +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the international number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Tadhg Hickey is described here on my screen as an Irish comedian, actor and writer, and he is indeed all of those things. But now he's something more. He is an international face and voice for the moral center of the world today, the moral center that stands with the oppressed people of Palestine, and he's just off the boat. Tadhg, welcome home. I'm sure you have been warmly received in your home city, in your home country, but please know that our entire audience was rooting for you, praying for you, and were never as happy as when we saw you bounding through Dublin airport in your singlet, looking a picture of joy as well you might have been, being greeted by your 2 young children and your good wife. So welcome home. I know you do not want, and you are repeatedly saying it, to dwell on what happened to you, because what happened to you pales by comparison with what happens every day to the Palestinians. But you must know that the international audience would value your reflections on what happened that dark night when the gangs of Netanyahu boarded your vessel. Would you talk us through that?
Of course, Akara, and thank you so much for a lovely intro and a lovely little feature whilst I was away. It meant a lot to my family, actually, and I thank you for it. Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I was in touch not long before the interception, and the most extraordinary thing about the interception is that Israel, a state on trial for genocide, just told the world about its new war crimes that it was planning. It was going to kidnap all these people, and it was going to bring them here, it was going to bring them there, and it just proceeds as is one, just does whatever it wants, and the world just lets it do it. It really is quite bewildering that they're so out and proud about it. They speak about it in their media. They ring up the various embassies, the relevant ones, the Germans, and they tell them their plans. I think maybe potentially the presence of the Spanish and Italian navies might have put them off, kind of all out trying to kill us, trying to murder us, as they did to the 10 Turkish activists in 2010. But they just see where the line is and they'll always cross it. So right up until interception, I suppose I'm a bit of a dreamer. I'm kind of thinking we're going to Gaza, and that's why I signed up for the flotilla. I didn't sign up to be intercepted by Israel. I have no business in Israel. I wasn't planning on going there, and I didn't sign up to go on a jolly, or as Piers Morgan might say, to go on a selfie yacht. I think, like, if I wanted to go on a selfie yacht, I could pick a better route than one that would end up coming face to face with the most psychopathic, unpredictable army probably the world has ever seen. So right up until the end, and some of the boats got as close as 20 nautical miles, and that was my main thing. I was just like, we're so close to keeping a promise to all these people in Gaza to actually reach the beaches. But as you say, it became clear that it wasn't going to happen, and you're faced with this army that's both, sadistic, but also kind of ridiculous. Like, it felt like they didn't really know what to do with all these boats. And, I think there was probably 47, 50 boats in the end. One was thinking if there was 100 boats, they wouldn't have been able to deal with us. And to just skip ahead for a moment, you know, there's 100,000 people who signed up for the next mission. There were 30,000 signed up for my mission. So I think Israel's got a massive, massive problem on its hands. There's just so many people globally now have had enough with the lies and the propaganda. And I really, truly believe that this state is on its last legs. But to go back to the evening, the commandos that actually came in our boat, it's just random who you're going to get. The commandos that came in our boat, it was a relatively light interception. They commandeered the boat. You are held at gunpoint. I was the first person to be isolated. So when they came on board and they told us to keep our hands in the air, and they're actually being quite, you know, nice at the start. And I was kind of thinking, just for a moment, I just faltered for a split second and thought, maybe some of them are kind of okay, because I'm actually always seeking the humanity in people. Anyway, that's kind of my default. And then you just look to the side and you realize that one of the other commandos is filming the whole event. So it's everything is contrived with them. Everything is a propaganda opportunity, and they were filming themselves having a light interception. Again, they can use that for posterity to say they're the most moral army in the world, living in the most moral democracy in the Middle East. But I was the first to be isolated and at gunpoint. So obviously you think to yourself, I don't know what way this is going to go. I've got young kids at home. I've just got to stick to my training and do what I do and be completely non-violent. It's a non-violent mission. But in that moment, I suppose it's no longer in your hands. You don't know what's going to happen. And I kept thinking to myself, we're dealing with an army that has enjoyed a level of impunity the world has never seen. So what's stopping them saying that even if I am totally non-violent, that I was confrontational with them, I'm out and proud as, you know, somebody who has been quite supportive of the resistance. I've been to Lebanon, blah, 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 blah. You can frame this, no problem. They can murder me in international waters and my family would probably never know the truth, because the Western media, including my own, is so cowardly and so bought and paid for that I would back them to go with the Israeli line as they have for the last 2 years rather than the truth. That was the kind of stuff going through my head initially. But the commandos getting onto the boat, that was the easy part. That was by far the most pleasant aspect of the experience of the next 5 days. It got an awful lot worse from there, I can tell you.
Tell us about that. They took you to a notorious prison where good friends of mine have rotted in the past.
Exactly.
What was that like? What was your experience like in the dungeons?
So before we get to the dungeons, we're brought to Ashdod port where we're manhandled off the boat. And then they had this kind of like Guantanamo Bay, kind of almost Nazi Germany-esque kind of a theme park set up where everyone is put out in the hot sun. You cable ties, seated in awkward positions. And if you don't adhere to the awkward position, you have to go up on your knees. About 3 hours in the sun, and then as the sun went down, they move you from spot to spot. I lifted my head up to see what was going on with one of my comrades at one point who was being physically and mentally abused. They always target ethnic minorities as well. It seemed like the darker the colour of your skin, the more likely you were to get a hiding from them. I've never in my life, I think Chris Small said this as well, I've never in my life seen a more almost cartoonishly, openly racist group of people in my life. If you were white, you'd get a slightly better time. And if the more Palestinian you are, like the more depravity is going to be visited upon you. So I had my head slapped a few times because I was looking up just to offer a bit of solidarity to people. We were eventually about 6 or 7 hours in that position before we were processed. So yeah, and there's all these kind of like little Hitlers, you know, they're kind of like shit Nazis, you know, like they're like kind of real like fascists, but they're not very good at it. So there's a kind of like the phrase I was thinking for them is kind of silly sadists. On the one hand, they're kind of, you know, really sinister in what they do, and they try and create this kind of spook sensation for you, but they're not very good at it. There's a lot of fear in their eyes as well, and that's a theme of the next few days. This attempt to put guns in your face, and dogs and SWAT teams and psychological, you know, torture techniques. But also there's a real weakness to them as well at the same time. It's this weird duality with them. And I think it was very symbolic of an ideology and a state that's in its last legs, I hope. But yeah, so I get processed. They go through my bag. If they see any Palestinian image, or like I had my Ladji Celtic jersey and they just threw it in the bin. And I kept thinking, if you were so comfortable in yourself, why do you have to dispose of anything that bears the symbols of the country that you've taken over? Like, if you're so comfortable in your righteousness to be in this land, why is every Palestinian image such a threat for you? Like, it reminded me, I think, of some of the kind of harder elements of loyalism in the north of Ireland. It's so insecure, it has to have its flag everywhere, and it has to try and kind of degrade and traduce anything in the opposing community's culture. It's just like screamed insecurity to me. We eventually get processed. I don't sign anything. They asked me to sign something that gave some recognition that I had entered Israel illegally. I hadn't. I'd been kidnapped in international waters. I refused to sign anything because that would be to acknowledge that I was even trying to get to Israel in itself. I wasn't. I was trying to get to Gaza, which I think most people would concede is in Palestine, a state that Britain, Ireland, Australia, most major Western powers recognise. I refused to eat, and I just went with a dignified non-compliance protest, as is the kind of tradition, I think, of the Irish Republican struggle. And then when I eventually got to Kitziyot prison, I realised that they'd got their wish to send us to a torture prison, as you say, like a notorious prison where many Palestinians have been murdered, tortured to death. And I thought we were going to get special treatment because we were white, though. I really believe like this will be, a performative more than anything else. And as the first day particularly passed, I realised, oh my God, we're not getting water. We're not getting access to a lawyer. We're not getting any contact with the outside world. And there was an Irish comrade of ours in the cell across from me who needed insulin. I don't think you'd mind me saying he's a 75-year-old man. And they would not give him his insulin, to the point where most of my wing were rioting, like slamming on doors, doing everything in our power to try and get them to give him his insulin. And they didn't, because they said they didn't care. And I quote one of the guards specifically, the night that we were rioting to get Paddy his insulin, he said, "We do not have any doctors for animals. You people are animals to us." And it's very hard for people to understand just how far down the rabbit hole the Israelis are as a society, in terms of their just emboldened, brazen, racist worldview, where they're just the supremacists. They kind of rule the world, and everyone else can go to pot. I felt particularly embarrassed that the Irish government still has such a diplomatic relationship, and Ireland has a roaring trade with Israel, when they're so openly anti-Irish as well. They hate us. They despise us. They called me Irish as they pulled me off the boat and manhandled me onto the ground. And as I say, they tried to let a 75-year-old Irish activist who spent most of the last 10 years working in summer camps in Bethlehem, they tried to let him die. They didn't, they were happy to let him die. And yet Ireland still has a roaring trade and allows our airports to be used by US war machines to send the weapons to continue the extermination in Palestine. Such a disgrace that the Irish government lets the Irish people down that much. When they already hate us, we might as well sanction them. We might as well break off diplomatic relations, because we're the bane of their lives in terms of Europe. Like, we've totally let them down. They think that we should be on their side. But I'm glad that the Irish people will never en masse side with a racist, apartheid, fascist state like that has to be dismantled.
Now, you say you didn't get water. How then did you all survive?
Well, they would, with absolute contempt, they will just say, you drink that, you drink the toilet water. So they refer to a little hovel that each of us have in our cell. Imagine there's usually about 12 or 13 men to a cell. We haven't washed in weeks. We've just come off a mission that has gone on much longer than any of us anticipated. None of us are smelling particularly well. A lot of us are struggling mentally, and we're stuck in this kind of cell together. And from the first moment, it was like, the bottled water is for us. That's for the prison guards. Yard time, the sun, is for us. And this is where you go. You go into your little cages. They would sometimes move us from cage to cage, this kind of psychological warfare. They'd put you on a hot, absolute, you're in the middle of a desert, baking sun, and they'd bring you to this sham court where there's a judge and you don't have access to a lawyer, and the judge is asking you to comment on this thing that you've been accused of doing, which is entering Israel illegally. And you just keep saying, well, I haven't entered Israel illegally. I was in international waters and kidnapped about 40 nautical miles from Gaza. Also, I'd like to speak to my lawyer. And they're like, I know your lawyer is on the way. and then the lawyer never comes. It's just this kind of sense of, it's almost cartoonish evil. And I just kept thinking to myself, how are they allowed to treat Western citizens like this? And as well as I do, we can bitch and moan about it and whatnot. And I really hope people do listen to what we have to say. Many of us were beaten. Again, the darker the color of your skin is, the worse it will be for you. No medicine, no doctor, drink toilet water for 3 or 4 days. That's absolutely fine. If you need insulin and you're about to die, no problem, that can happen. But ultimately, George, nothing will probably be done. That's what's kind of heartbreaking about it. I still can't quite get my head around it. But I had, unfortunately, had to accept that when it comes to Palestinians, obviously Western governments particularly don't give a shit. They're happy to back Israel all the way, to kill as many of them as they so wish, in whatever degree of bloodthirst and bloodletting they want to reach. That's totally fine. Who knows how many Palestinians have been murdered in the last 2 years? And who knows how many Palestinians will be left to rot? I think a Palestinian prisoner passed away today, effectively left to die. Yeah. And my partner and I just saw it earlier, and we both started crying again for the 10th time in the last couple of days, because my whole family are completely traumatized. I found it, reasonably okay, because it kind of, there's a tradition in Ireland of a kind of a stoic standing up to bullies. You don't let them defeat you. We know what we're doing is just. Ben Gvir, absolute cartoon-faced, cartoon-souled Ben Gvir waltzing into, our cells, armed to the teeth, describing us as terrorists. And you're kind of thinking, we were the guys who were trying to bring baby formula to besieged population in Gaza. You're the people who are exterminating babies at a rate that the world has never seen in modern times. And we're the terrorists. It kind of felt in that prison where you're completely abandoned for days on end. You've no contact with the outside world. Then, and only then, in the last 2 years of activism, and maybe in the last 10 or 20 years of reading about Palestine, only then did I really understand what it's like to be a Palestinian for a moment, just a glimmer, that you can be left to rot in the prisons of these openly racist, heartless, I've never seen such sadism in my life in the eyes of these monstrous people who are hideous inside and out. But because I have a passport of privilege, they can low-level torture me and Paddy and the other Irish activists and the other global sumudflotilla gang for a few days, but we'll get home. And I think at this point, most of us are home, but the Palestinians will never get home. And I just kept thinking to myself, at this moment in time, there's about 500 Palestinian children in these monsters' prisons, and all the Western governments just turn the other way, and they know now exactly. I mean, imagine if they do that to us, with the privilege that we have, with the platform that I have. I can come out of these prisons and I can talk to you, and people can hear my story. No one will ever hear the stories of the Palestinian children who are being tortured in these, I don't think I've ever used the phrase before in my life, in these subhuman people's prison camps. They're just the most. And you know what, coming face to face with some of them, I just thought to myself, there's no reforming this. This as a state, as an ideology, as an entity has to be dismantled. It'd be like trying to reform apartheid South African government. They're just, it was an eye opener. It was like the mask. When you saw behind the mask, it was even more hideous than you would have imagined.
Another Irish tradition when political prisoners are thrown into a cage is solidarity. I'm thinking of the H blocks, which became a university, and the solidarity built in those days continues until now, although many are now dying off. When you meet the people who were interned in these cages, their fellow feeling is obvious immediately. Have you bonded now forever with the 500, the gallant 500 that sailed on and on into the guns?
Absolutely, man. And it's something with the Israelis that, well, first of all, they're culturalists as well. Like when fascism takes over to the degree that has taken over in Israel, there's no culture, because culture kind of can't really coexist with the fascist, racist ideology. because true art can't really breathe then in a state like that. It has to be just, you know, art in the service of the state. And it really feels like that. It's a cultureless, witless, oppressive energy. They shout at each other. You know, like, I know Irish people kind of can be quite loud, Arabs can be quite loud, but this is on another level, like just domestic administrative people in offices, like just kind of screaming and barking at each other. They've kind of brought like humanity to a really low level, I think, like, and in the midst of all that kind of darkness and barking and whatnot, there was something really beautifully human about not just the Irish, as you say, but all the activists together, to a man and to a woman. I like, put it this way, I'm telling you about my little traumas now because it's important that the world knows what they do to Western, a lot of Western activists. It's important for it to be documented, and I will document it myself, and I will do interviews this week, and then I will put it to bed, because we need to get back focused on, they're doing this to Palestinians right now, you know what I mean, who don't have the voice. But the point I'm getting at is, if the Israelis think this is going to break our spirit, or has broken our spirit, to a man and to a woman, we came out of that prison, of our prison cells, and we're eventually making our way home. We're planning on what the next move is. We're planning on what we do together next, and the bonds, as you say, because when you're on the side of justice, when you face inhumanity, and when you come up close and personal to it, and all they have is violence. So I was kind of half expecting some of them to try and approach us in a way of, you know, you've got the wrong end of the stick, you know, you've heard propaganda from Hamas or whatnot. There was none of that. It was just ugly, bald violence. That's all they have. When we lashed the cell doors to try and get Paddy his insulin, by the way, backed up. Paddy, I don't think, had any other Irish in his cells. He had about 10 or 11 other nationalities. And on the flight home, he was telling me he was so moved by the fact that there was Algerians, Turkish, French, and a lot of young lads, and they led the protest for Paddy. So it wasn't even an Irish thing. It was a solidarity thing as a comrade who was about to be left to die by a fascist regime. And we all basically became ungovernable until he at least saw a doctor. Now, they still didn't give him his insulin, but they at least brought a doctor, like, you know, because they had told us that they didn't have any doctors for animals, but they must have made an exception because the solidarity was so strong. But in that kind of movement of people that have each other's backs and support each other, it just became so clear that we will prevail. We have to prevail, because we're just, we're on the right side of history. We know they're in the wrong. And all they had was violence. For the crime of backing Paddy up that night, they burst into my cell, for instance, SWAT team, a salivating, squelching attack dog, and guns are put in our faces. You know, you can see their little lasers like traveling around your face, and you don't know, because they've enjoyed such impunity, you don't know if they're going to shoot. But that's all they had. That's all they have. You know what I mean? And I really want to leave people with that idea that, like, we looked into the whites of their eyes, particularly the Irish. We weren't shouting at them. We weren't screaming at them. We sang rebel songs at them. We were non-compliant. We didn't take their little showers so that they could take photos of us looking fresh before we left. We didn't eat their horrible food. You know, we just non-compliance with dignity, and we looked them in the eye and we saw that they're scared. And all they had, when all you have is violence, and you've no answer other than more violence and more hatred and more racism and more apartheid, you've got nowhere to go. There's no wiggle room. And I think we are the many, they are the few. What we're doing is just, and I think what they're doing is unjust. And I just would urge people, they're at a very, very low point at the moment. The fact that they threatened me personally with 10 to 20 days of incarceration, and I signed nothing. I didn't eat their crap food, and I non-complied across the board, and I was out in 4 days. And I think that's not because they thought I was a nice guy. It's because they're running out of room. They're running out of road. And I think now is not the time to let up. We need to keep pushing, keep pushing. Italy has become ungovernable because of this. Their economy has been brought to a halt. That's where Ireland needs to go. And that's where all of Europe needs to go, because it's really no longer about just Palestine. It's about all our humanity. If we lose Gaza, we lose the world.
Well, I'll leave it there, but I do think this interview will live long and travel far. And there's so much more that we could talk about, but so pristine, so priceless was the interview you gave me. I'll thank you and bid you good night. Tadhg Hickey, Irish comedian, actor, writer, and hero. Let me take a quick break and I'll be right back. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe. If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the MOATS team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official MOATS graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a MOATS graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a MOATS graduate at £10 a month, as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is. And you can receive official MOATS legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Do support the show through Patreon, please. Patreon.com/George Galloway. Be a part of the vanguard. Be a part of the creme de la creme. Let's take Giuliano in London on the IDF. First call of the evening. Giuliano, welcome.
Thank you, George, and thank you for joining the program again. I wanted to speak tonight in reference to a specific of the IDF. They call it the IDF Lone Soldiers, or it's called the Mahal program, basically. Before I do that, I'll take a step back just to clarify the position. Now, on October 2014, 13,000 people, 13,000 British citizens sign up a petition to prompt the government to discuss that British citizens who fight in the Israeli army should face criminal prosecution on return in the UK. Obviously, the British government at that time, and unfortunately today, said, no, we don't recognize Palestine, so Israel is an ally. Cut long story short, they will not prosecute anyone. And coming back to these days, on the last weekend, the lovely Metropolitan Police arrested 500 people, still to holding up a sign opposing genocide and support Palestine nature. So if you hold up this sign, you get arrested. On the 22nd of September, the UK, however, has recognized formally Palestine to protect the viability of the two states, which is a bit, ironic, if you say least. However, talking about on the other side, you have this Mahal program. Now, the Mahal program is effectively a program of the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, for people non-Israeli, no Israeli passport, basically. Yeah. So if you are a man younger than 14 or a woman younger than 21, you are eligible for, and you are non-Israeli. You can actually join the IDF. But let's say that you are not, and you're very keen to help Israel. There are plenty of organizations in this country and pretty much all over the world for you to join. You can actually join the media group. You can actually go there and volunteering on a kibbutz, or there is a list as long as very long on the actual website, Mahal website, for you to help out the IDF. Now, at this stage, it's very important to say that the British government has taken no position in reference to British citizens as well as British resident for that respect, for people that go there and serve the IDF or serve any of this organization, not even questioning them, not even asking them, what did you go there for, or any position whatsoever. Nobody has been arrested, even though last year in March the British Foreign Office admitted that at least 100 British citizens, they are illegal settlers. Needless to say, none of them being questioned, none of them being asked, any questions, and no arrested. So, due to the fact, in effect, since they're so strict on people holding a sign opposing a genocide, for people that committing the genocide in front of all our phones. Could we not, have a debate and ask the question, why did you go there and did you commit any crimes, and maybe prosecute some of them? That's the question for you, George. Thank you for your time.
Well, they're getting a red carpet welcome at the airport. Unlike Gayatri and me, nobody detains them under the Terrorism Act in a legal black hole. You are not under arrest, but you may not leave. You have no right of silence, and any refusal to cooperate with our questions will be of itself a terrorist offense. That's the Kafkaesque situation that exists, that old ladies in their 90s with dog collars around their necks are being arrested under the Terrorism Act for holding up a piece of cardboard, while somebody who has just been serving in Gaza in an Israeli uniform, an army which is accused by both the International Criminal Court, to which we are a signatory and of which we are a founder member, and the International Court of Justice, of charges of genocide. So you come back having been in Gaza with a machine gun in your hand, killing women and children, according to the ICJ and the ICC, and you walk through British airports on a red carpet and go back to your job. In a bank, in the police, in an hospital, in a university, until the next time you decide to go to Gaza and perform all of this all over again, whilst blind men, 93-year-old ladies, people in wheelchairs, people with multiple disabilities, people in their 90s, in their 80s, in their 70s, and the majority of the 2,000 now under arrest in Britain on terrorism charges are old age pensioners, whilst a gun-toting brigand from the so-called IDF, as just described by an eyewitness, Tadhg Hickey, minutes ago, can travel without let or hindrance. If you think I'm feeling mad about it, you're right. Thanks, Giuliani. Now, you can scan the QR code now, leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Natalie M. has, and she says, I'm so happy Tadhg returned home to his family. And John O'Rourke said, Tadhg is quite an impressive vocalist, as witnessed on board the flotilla vessel. And Rosie Lee says, Tadhg is a diamond, for sure. Stephen Mulholland says, the terrorist outside the mosque in Manchester pledged allegiance, outside the synagogue, Steve, pledged allegiance to the Islamic State on a phone call to the police. And David Lammy handed over £70 million to Jolani in Syria. And Karaoke Stars says Netanyahu called Putin and begged him not to sell arms to Iran, then proceeded to threaten Putin, saying Israel will arm Ukraine. Netanyahu is not a leader, he is a gangster, like his puppet, Trump. Powerful. Let's hear from Christopher in Redcar on Farage and Starmer. Christopher, welcome.
George, it's Chris McGlade. How are you doing? First of all,
I'm good. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
I'm calling for two reasons. The first reason I'm calling, and you have to excuse me because I'm getting over a cold, but the first reason I'm calling is because I was angry when I heard in the press about you and your wife being detained or arrested at the airport by armed policemen who, from what I can gather, I don't think they arrested you, but they detained you and questioned you for 9 hours. So I was angry about that. But the second reason, and I'm trying to keep the anger down, but the second reason that I'm calling is because I want to point out the ridiculousness of some people online who are comparing Nigel Farage and Reform to Hitler and the Nazi Party, when the things that they say that Farage and Reform would do if they were elected are being done now by this government. They're arresting people like yourself or detaining people like yourself on the left with armed police. You've got comedy writers like Graham Linehan being arrested at airports by armed police. You've got people on the right like Katie Hopkins who are being arrested, whether you agree with her or not, or think she's a comedian or not, but you've got people on the right like Katie Hopkins being arrested for a joke that they told on their streaming podcast. You've got 12,000 people a year being arrested for things that they've said on Twitter. You've got pensioners in wheelchairs on protests against the situation in Gaza being arrested because they're holding up placards. You've got our government supporting these terrorists who've taken over Syria, and it's not 70 million, it was in the BBC, they've given them 94 million pounds of public money, while at the same time the government is arming Israel, who are sworn enemies of the terrorists that we are supporting in Syria. You've got Starmer constantly attacking, and you know what the British working class means to me, George, but you've got Starmer attacking the British working class as far right all the time, whilst he's then sending £24 billion to Ukraine, which is wick with Nazis, and then welcoming them when they came to Parliament at the behest of Boris Johnson last year in Parliament when the Assault Battalion came over, and all of them, all the sycophants and hypocrites from Boris Johnson to Starmer, they welcomed Nazis in our Parliament. They're bringing in ID cards, ignoring 3 million people who've signed petitions against it. They're sacking their own MPs for dissent and for standing on picket lines. And all these people who are making stupid comments or memes or whatever you call them online, all these people are doing in comparing Nigel Farage and Reform to Hitler and the Nazis, right, is distracting people away from the fact that we've got fascists in control of our country and our government now. And it's about time that people just woke up and saw that every single day people are having their civil liberties and their freedoms taken away from them. When I heard you on that press conference say that your wife was arrested or questioned because she had her fingernails painted in the Palestinian colours, I thought, my God, what is happening in this country? And we all
well,
of
look,
us
you've summed it up in your inimitable poetic way. Christopher is the working class poet, Chris McGlade. You have summed up the many, many contradictions in the country that we have, and we have to face facts that our enemies, if you can relate it to a roulette table, our enemies win, whether it's black or red, whether it's odd or even, whatever number it is on the board, they have won. The House always wins in the game that we are now in. Whether it's Farage or Starmer or Badenough, they are all of them, with Netanyahu against the Palestinians, with the Zelensky regime and the Azov battalion in the Ukraine, all of them. The entire parliament. I mean, you know, Chris, I was a member 7 times of the British Parliament. Me and my wife were detained for all those hours under the Terrorism Act, not arrested, but not free to leave, no right of silence. Any silence will be itself an offence under the Terrorism Act, and as they pointed out, you try flying anywhere when you've got a conviction under the Terrorism Act. How's that for fascism? Our country is on the wrong road. It's headed to a very dark place, and the politicians, not one member of parliament, not one, has raised my being held at Gatwick Airport under the Terrorism Act. Not one. Not a Tory, Libertarian, like David Davis. Not a Labour member. Not Jeremy Corbyn. Not one of them. Not one of Reform. Not one of the Nationalists. None of them have raised in the House that a long-standing member of this House was treated in this way. We have a one-party state in this country, and we are on the road to fascism. Of that, I am no longer in any doubt at all. Christopher, thank you for the call. Look, tonight's Wall of Fame is bristling, I'm told, with new weekly and monthly donors. A big thank you if you've been on to the MOATS.tv website already this week. You can get your name up in lights. Like Raymond Blessing, Graham Kenyon, James Preston, Motaz Salah, and a big thanks to our weekly donor, James Glass. Big thanks to all of you. However much or little you were able to give, we've got to keep 2 shows on the road and set up MOATS Asia and MOATS Africa in the course of the next few months. I'm going to China, as many of you know, with Gayatri very soon, and we hope that we will find the necessary there to launch MOATS Asia, and MOATS Africa will not be far behind. Right after this very short break, because I'm 6 minutes late, comes the one and only Chris Hedges, political commentator, journalist, writer, and host of the Chris Hedges Report. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, read by George Galloway, available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Another big poll tonight. Who should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, Donald Trump or Greta Thunberg? Well, you'll not be surprised, except on X, where Donald has a respectable showing of 23%. Greta is winning it out the park. So the only thing still in doubt is how many will actually cast their vote, making it the most representative of polls. Chris Hedges, as I described in my monologue, is a journalist of great repute. And one would have thought that of all the people to recognise that, the National Press Club of Australia would be amongst the front ranks. Alas not, but he's here on the mother of all talk shows. Let's start with that one. Chris, if we may, I know we have bigger fish to fry in this interview, but it did strike me as more than a sign of our times that a National Press Club would ban a Pulitzer Prize winner from addressing a meeting in their halls. Can you explain that?
I was scheduled to speak October 20th. The title of my talk was The Betrayal of Palestinian Journalists by the Western media, which has amplified Israeli lies. Many of those reporters, I come from the ranks of that, I work for the New York Times, know their lies, discrediting the work of their Palestinian colleagues. And the press club, which had confirmed the talk and put it up on the website, immediately pulled it down from the website and issued a statement, a very disingenuous statement, saying that it was tentative. It was never tentative. We have the email correspondence, which several Australian media publications have now published. So I think there was probably pressure, without doubt, from the Israel lobby. Many of the donors or the sponsors of the club, including Raytheon, sell weapons to Israel to sustain the genocide. And according to unnamed sources within the club, they reached out to the Israeli ambassador in Australia, former lieutenant colonel in the IDF. He was a paratrooper, in the name of quote unquote balance. Well, there wasn't any balance because I was erased. So yeah, I think it was incredibly shameful for a press club to shut down a talk about Palestinian journalists.
Well, shameful, yes, but stupid also, isn't it? I mean, what does that leave the media in Australia looking like now? Utterly discreditable.
Yeah, it was stupid, and it was stupid on their part to lie. Someone took a screenshot, unfortunately for them, of the announcement on their website with my picture, and then they attempted to say that it was never put up. And then, of course, we have all of the back and forth, including the confirmation letter. So, yeah, it was very poorly handled on their part because, of course, it eviscerated their credibility, which is a good thing for us.
And are you still going down under? I'm sure there are many others who'd be delighted to host you while they still can.
Yeah, well, it was one of a series of events. I'm giving the annual Edward Said lecture in Adelaide. I think Francesca Albanese gave it last year. So that was one, but it was a big event because it's usually televised nationally. But yeah, there will be other events, including the Said lecture.
Now, turning to the big picture, it seems to me that, as usual, Trump prematurely ejaculated his joy at being a shoo-in for the Nobel Peace Prize because he'd brought peace to the Holy Land, which has been, he said, at war with each other for thousands of years. History is not his strong point, neither is geography, but the the story was Trump had done it. He'd brought peace to the Holy Land. Well, he hasn't. The people are still drowning in their own blood, burning in their own tents. Netanyahu is still massacring people every hour, and no one is stopping them.
Well, you follow this for a long time, George, and so have I, going all the way back to Camp David. Everything is always laid out in phases, usually actually with timetables, like 5 years. Now, Israel never abides by those timetables. But this plan is just risible, laughable. It's so ridiculous and just violates one kind of international law after another. There are no timetables. Everything's amorphous. Of course, Israel, there may be a pause. There may be a release of the remaining Israeli hostages and some of those Palestinians who are being held, often without charges, including women and children, in Israeli prisons, many of whom have been held for decades. But if you read through the plan, it doesn't provide any process of self-determination, of representative government. There's, resurrecting Tony Blair, creating this quote-unquote board of peace, so there's no reputable outside authority like the UN. It's the replacement of Israeli occupation with an international stabilization force. I'm quoting from the document. It allows Israel to maintain a security perimeter inside Gaza's borders. It demilitarizes Hamas. It not only demilitarizes Hamas, it calls for Hamas to essentially abolish itself. There's again, that fragmentation of Palestinian authority, the absence of any kind of reparations for the wholesale destruction of Gaza by Israel, no accountability, of course, for the Israeli war crimes, no call for the dismantling of illegal settlements in the West Bank, or the establishment of recognized borders under the UN, the right of return. So it's an incredibly porous, empty, hastily written document, but it's really designed, and the funny part is, of course, Netanyahu immediately made amendments to it after it was put out by the Trump White House. But we've seen this pattern, whether it's Camp David, whether it's Oslo, whether it's all the ceasefire agreements in Gaza. Israel gets what it wants initially and then ignores the agreement. So that pattern will not be disrupted. Israel is very close to completing its demented goal of cleansing or ethnically cleansing, depopulating Gaza. It's creating these concentration camps in the south, luring and using starvation as a weapon, luring famished, malnourished Palestinians to the south in the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. These are just 4 piles of food that create riots. There isn't enough food. It's just their bait. They're baiting them. And then they're not allowed to go back to the north. They're put into concentration camps in the south and Han Yunis and everywhere else. So it's that very cynical policy, that cruelty, that sadism, that won't end, nor will Washington make it end. So a pause, even a short pause, is better than the daily slaughter we witness. But in terms of the long term, it's not going to disrupt Israel's plan, not only in Gaza, but ultimately in the West Bank.
Yeah, sure. One thing that is ending, though, is the support enjoyed by AIPAC and by the Israel lobby amongst the American people. Every poll that I now read, and I read as many of them and as often as I can, polls of Democratic voters, polls of Republican voters, polls of people over 70 and polls of people under 30, Megyn Kelly's famous quip that everybody under 30 in America hates Israel. The loss of the once slavish support of opinion formers, influencers like Candace Owens, even like Steve Bannon, even like Alex Jones, people that were troopers for the Israel line. The loss of all of these and more. The loss of Charliekirk, as Candace has now proved. That is a genie that's out the bottle, isn't it? That's a tide that has turned and will not come back.
Yeah, and that's, of course, mortal, ultimately, but it may take a while. I mean, what's interesting, George, is that, AIPAC used to hold these huge annual conventions in Washington, and Democratic and Republican congresspeople and senators would fight to get top billing. Now these gatherings are tiny, and especially Democrats don't want to go anywhere near it. They may not blockade Israel, but they don't want to be tainted by AIPAC.
I saw Matt Gaetz quoting today what happened when he first started out looking for AIPAC support. He said we all had to wear one of these code things that we've got on the corner of the screen. And the AIPAC people, if they liked you, they would donate straight to your code. Right there, it's like a supermarket checkout. Yes, I'll take him, I'll take him, and I'll take him. It was just about the most demeaning process it's possible to imagine, and yet for all these years, American politicians have been going through that because, well, it was well worth it to do it.
Yeah, it was, the American political system is one of legalized bribery, so it's not just AIPAC. These people are, every once in a while there'll be bills submitted to Congress, and the lobbying firm that wrote it, they'll forget to remove the letterhead on the top of it. But yeah, AIPAC played that game very well. What's interesting is we are watching a wheel, of course, not only shutting down voices. You and your wife were just held, these kind of more draconian forms of silencing those of us who stand up for Palestinian rights. But we see it here in the United States. One of the wealthiest men in the United States, Larry Ellison, has just bought up CBS News and appointed this arch Zionist, she's never been a journalist, to run the news division and report directly. His son is overseeing it, but report directly to his son. And he's about to attempt to buy CNN. Now, what will happen to those media outlets, which don't have much credibility left, is that they will have none. But it shows this desperate attempt to control the narrative in terms of public discourse by criminalizing those of us who speak out for Palestinian rights, but also controlling a media that, frankly, has been fairly subservient to Israeli interests during the 2 years of the genocide.
It is desperate, but again, it's stupid. In former times, if things were not so desperate, you would have found someone rather more eminent than bariweiss, with a little watched blog that they've bought for 150 million quid. Makes you wonder what our work is worth in that situation, Chris. They would have spread it around a bit. You take CNN, I'll take CBS, you take TikTok. Ellison's bought the whole lot. Yeah. And his relationship to Israel could not be clearer. And so the net result will be actually a decline in the popularity of the settler state, not an increase.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the media has just done horrific, including my old employer, the New York Times, job repeating one Israeli lie after another, silence without screams, or whatever that ridiculous story was about sexual assault. She's a human hand grenade. I mean, yeah, they can spend all that money, but it is going to be completely counterproductive because they're taking over media institutions which have extremely little credibility, and by the time they're finished, they won't have any.
Every cloud has a silver lining.
Yeah.
While I've got you though, Chris, your expertise is global, not just the Middle East. Are they really going to give Zelensky hundreds of Tomahawk cruise missiles that can land in Moscow? That'll be World War III if that happens, won't it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't ultimately know, but it looks like they will. Of course, it's insane. But remember, they've already given them weapon systems that allow him to strike within Russia. I mean, they've all, which at the beginning of the conflict was a red line that Biden said he wouldn't cross.
Well, that's right. I mean, he was going to solve it in 24 hours. And now he's putting, if he goes ahead with this, he's putting all of European Russia in range of cruise missiles. You and I are old enough to remember just how the cruise missile deployment, Cruise and Pershing, and the SS-20, 21, that took the world to the brink of World War III back in the 80s. And now we're about to do it all again.
Yeah, and the decision to deploy will be in the hands of the Ukrainians. It's our fate, but it's in their hands.
Yeah, is Donald Trump still sane?
No, Donald Trump is a deeply disturbed, intellectually challenged, morally bankrupt, narcissistic. I mean, he's probably not even well physically, but he's certainly a fairly mentally deranged individual. Just like watch one of his 1 hour long rants that he did, with that collection of generals or anywhere else. He gives the same speech over and over. No, he's a very frightening figure because he's at once impulsive and idiotic. Indeed,
and also about to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, formerly of this parish.
Well, we know why that's happening, George, don't we?
Well, I think I know. What's your
come on.
take?
Well, we know he's all over that. He's apparently there's just one video after another. There was one victim who was very swiftly silenced, but did provide testimony directly about Trump, an underage girl who was forced by Maxwell and Epstein to provide sexual services to Trump. And she writes in detail about it. Her actually and another girl, both of them were underage. And then that was, obviously they were bought off. They won't speak anymore. But we know why Maxwell's going to be pardoned because, and this stuff, apparently the video archives that Epstein had, it was extensive. Much of it was found in his safe, which was, I think, the size of a closet in his mansion in New York. The FBI cleaned it out very quickly. They have it, or if they haven't destroyed it. And it's not just Trump. I mean, everybody's on there, Clinton and Bill Gates and Dershowitz, and apparently, the list of all of these, this kind of cabal of powerful white men. But Trump's definitely, there's not much doubt that Trump's on it. And of course, by pardoning Maxwell, he makes it, it's a kind of insurance policy that she isn't going to come out and because she knows.
Indeed she does. Chris Hedges, I hope your trip to Australia goes well. Let's try and speak to each other when you are there. Thanks for joining us as always on the mother of all talk shows. Who should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, Donald Trump or Greta Thunberg? Well, there ain't much doubt, except on X. whether Donald Trump should get that gig or not. He's got 9% on Telegram, 23% on X, 15% on the YouTube community poll, 7% on the YouTube stream, and 0% on my vanguard, my elite troops, the supporters on patreon.com/George Galloway. Let me take a quick break and then it's your calls, right up to Gayatri's social media news roundup. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So you've got 10 minutes left to vote. Who should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, Donald Trump or Greta Thunberg? Get your votes in on Telegram, X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on my Patreon page. Let's go to Utah and talk to Ryan about charliekirk. Ryan, welcome to the show. What light can you shed?
Hi. How you doing, George? Long time no see, or speak, I should say. I'd just like
great
to
hear you
say,
again.
I'm glad you and your wife are doing all right after getting arrested at detained at Gatwick Airport. That's a complete red neck for the British government and the police there. And I just want to acknowledge everybody that is trying to fight for truth at this moment. Yourself, your good wife, everybody that follows the show. The Irishman over that was speaking on the show earlier, everyone that is trying to fight.
Yeah.
So it's like, my goodness, the evil in this world cannot hide, because justice will come, whether in this life or the next. And I just want to say thank you for you and everyone else that is trying to stick up for other humans that are being butchered and tortured and killed by other humans that think they're better than anybody else. That is not true. We are all created equal. We are all God's children, and we will all stand as a witness of our deeds in this life when we need to meet our maker. And I just want to say, George, that the feeling in Utah the day of Charliekirk's assassination, my goodness, there was a heavy weight in the air, and we need to trust our guts. You know what I mean? The narrative that the media are trying to sway with the assassination, with Gaza, with anything right now that's being projected to us, we need to really trust our gut and listen to what the Lord's trying to tell us, because we will not stand for any more lies. And I just want to say thank you, mate, because as a Scotsman, as a human being, we will not stand for any more of this nonsense. We must fight for the right, and we must fight for the truth. And I'm proud to call you a fellow friend and a Scotsman and the Irishman and every other nationality. Right now, we are rising up against this evil, and they know that the game is up.
They do know that their day is numbered. Thank you kindly, Ryan, Scotsman in Utah, for those kind words and thoughts with which I concur completely. Their days are numbered. That doesn't mean it's a week on Tuesday. That doesn't mean it's next year. Nobody knows. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And you can't accurately predict when those weeks are going to be, but they are coming. The discrediting of the political class, the discrediting of the British government, which caused the arrest or non-arrest detention of Gayatri and me, the discrediting of Shabana Mahmood, who I hear you say, out in Utah, she is the here today, gone tomorrow Home Secretary, but here long enough to have completely crossed the Rubicon of seeking to criminalize, victimize in a vindictive and political way her office as Home Secretary in charge of policing. And a woman that used to go on Palestine marches that's now seeking to ban Palestine marches. A woman who used to hold up placards, who's now in charge of the arresting of people holding up placards. A Home Secretary that is reviled by the people on the right because of the colour of her face, because of the sound of her name, because of how she prays, and is now busy making a total enemy of everybody else as she shreds our ancient liberties. Keir Starmer himself, how much longer can he be for this political world? Macron, almost entirely bereft of any political support in France, having to dismiss Prime Minister after Prime Minister, Parliament after Parliament, unable to get out from under the mass unpopularity in which he languishes. Merz now saying that the Germans are going to have to work until they're 73 and that the welfare state in Germany can no longer be afforded because they're giving billions to Zelensky and they're ready to have another go with the Russian army in the morning. None of these people can last much longer. Donald Trump's popularity has plummeted. It's now under 40% approval rate. Keir Starmer is 11%. And Macron is about the same, if not less. Merz, about the same, if not less. These politicians are here today and gone tomorrow. The task is to make sure, Ryan, that they're replaced by better and not worse political forces. Now, let me give you the latest podcast news. We're now in the top 5 for politics in Zimbabwe, Indonesia, well done Gayatri, Nigeria and Serbia this week. We're in the top 20 in Pakistan, the UAE, South Africa, Lebanon, Russia and the Philippines. Amazing. Let me read that to you again. We're in the charts, top 20 in Pakistan, UAE, South Africa, Lebanon, Russia and the Philippines. Wow. You can download the MOATS podcast simply by scanning the QR codes. That's what they're called. The QR code on your screen now. But you can also listen on our website, moats.tv, when you're there, leaving your donation. Let's go to Canada. Khalid in Nova Scotia about the flotilla. Go ahead, Khalid.
Good afternoon, George, and the audience. First up, let me say this. I would vote for the phone board. I don't have an axe account or Twitter or the internet, so this is my verbal endorsement of that. Next to that, George, I just want to stand in line, and literally this line getting longer and longer, to congratulate you and salute you and for your broadcast. It is now not just essential, but it's quintessential. As media is beginning to disappear and being bought up, your show is awakening people around the globe. So I want to stand with everybody else who supports you, and I can tell by the words, many of the words you said, that you're just younger than I, but you hung around back in 1975 with them, with the same individuals that I did back in that day, meaning Yasser Arafat, Zia al-Haq, and so on, right? And you're still here. This is 50-odd years later, and you're still here, George, that is amazing. And so I want to say this. What happened to you and at the airport, that was horrible. But I want to say to you that the two of you together, right? That is you would know, because you're, as I say, just a little younger than me. So many men, and even women in this case, that has stood up for causes, and after they get into trouble, seeing a bit of trouble, they look to the left and right, the partners are gone. But thank God, alhamdulillah, Gayatri is right there with you, right? My encouragement is to both of you, and the love that you have, I just pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you nurture that love of God, and that will bind you, right? Keep you together, because both of you are so important to this movement. Indeed, I'm not going to steal the words. I will take the words that Benjamin Netanyahu said in this, where he said, "This is a war of blessing versus the curse." We can translate that to light versus dark. But I think we know where the light is. And today, you don't need to be ideological. You don't have to be left or right, or the center for that matter, or have any ideology to know that killing children, babies, mothers, and the efforts of the flotilla, which is shown as the global support. The people in the world are ahead of the governments right now, and I believe it's going to push for the real liberation of the Palestinian people, and also again Sudan and all the other sort of people around the world. It's the people of the world that have moved.
Well, look, I'll tell you what, Khaled, we're losing your line, but your remarks were so powerful, they surmounted, I hope, the technical difficulties on your line. Certainly on your personal comments, you touched me greatly, and I'm deeply grateful for what you said. I can assure you that Gayatri is stronger than me, younger than me, more vivacious than me, and will still be at the wicket long after I have retired to the pavilion. And by the grace of God, my 6 children and my grandchildren, my grandson Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza just yesterday. And I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. So I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it. I'm more determined as a result of it. So nobody should imagine that they can intimidate us. We are the original unintimidatable. And we'll go on as long as God gives us breath, speaking the truth as loudly and clearly as we can. Thank you, Khalid, in Nova Scotia, in which I've spoken, by the way. I gave a speech in Nova Scotia once, Halifax, I think. I remember it. Anyway, comments on tonight's poll. Marco Mata says, too bad the poll has a none of them, third option. Kuplex says, give the Peace Prize to Francesca Albanese. Definitely a runner, if you ask me. Rob Oz says, another stupid poll. The people of Gaza are the only heroes here. Sorry, Rob. And Karaoke Stars says, neither Trump nor Thunberg should be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The only person that should be is the one and only Francesca Albanese. And Joan Wright says, Francesca deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, not Trump or Greta. I'm not voting, as both options are wrong. Oh dear. Let's go to Rolf. Always a great call from Bermuda on the flotilla. Rolf, welcome back.
George, it's nice to be with you again. You had my friend, you had my colleague on. I thought he gave you a great honor. George, you may recall on my first call with you, I said that Gaza is where Western so-called liberal democracy went to die. And what happened to you and your wife is an example of that. The erosion of civil liberties in the West continues to decline and be actively undermined by Western elites, particularly in the German, UK, and USA. This is where we're seeing it most pronounced. France and Italy, we're starting to see the same thing. But let me say this here. The other few weeks ago, we were talking about Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk was a person who had been used maybe by Zionists. He started to promote their agenda and then realized that he couldn't continue to do so. But this is what we forget. Charlie Kirk first made his name by promoting white supremacy, George, in the U.S. Following the doctrine, as we're seeing with the Trump crowd, they're all white supremacists, George. Let's be honest. Let's not cut any corners here. By following the ideology summed up in that book, The Great Replacement Theory, written by that Frenchman who happens to be Jewish. And what we're seeing now is a alliance between white supremacists, particularly in the Anglosphere, Western elites in particular, and Zionists, Israel. That's why when I called you a few weeks ago, I told you you might as well rename the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland to the United Kingdom of Israel and Northern Ireland, similarly to the U.S., the United States of Israel. The whole countries have had their constitutions undermined and have gone all in an attempt to maintain their hegemony globally, the Anglo-Americans and the elites and their Western allies. And so let's not be under any illusions here of what we're up against. George Zimmerman, as my cousin Khalid highlighted, that goes way back in terms of the struggle for our countries in the global South to gain true sovereignty in this world, and not to be subjugated by those who want to ruthlessly exploit to maintain their dominance of the world, where might makes right. Gaza is a clear example of that, a clear example of what has gone on for the last few hundred years. Let me tell your audience out in the global world out there, Gaza is probably the 150th Gaza that the world has witnessed. Not so grandly in terms of on our television sets, but in all those countries. Did you know that the UK, the United Kingdom, probably starting with England, has invaded more places around the world, has fought more wars over the last 400 years than any other nation in the world. And we're still seeing that mentality, again, what I call the Anglo-American Empire, George. And we have to...
Well, you're of course completely. I'm cutting you short only because of the hour, Rolf, and you made your point extremely powerfully. One of my sons is currently reading a book about the only countries we haven't invaded yet. And it's laughably small. It's a laughably small number. I forget what it is, 24 or 34 countries that we haven't invaded yet. Of course, you're calling from one of them. The empire has died in its kinetic sense, but in its subliminal and psychological sense, not at all. I mean, Keir Starmer, with his vanishingly small political base, presiding over a country that's going down the drain. I tried to get a doctor's appointment this morning for one of my children, a small child, a young child. Once upon a time, and not that long ago, you would have been told to bring them right in, and they'd be seen right away. In my time, actually, the doctor would have come out to the house to visit a child with a problem. That's how old I am. They told me I couldn't get an appointment for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I have paid in tax a mountain of money that is supposed to go into the creation of our National Health Service. But a child can't be seen in less than 3 weeks in a small town. And before anyone tries to racialize it, well, there are virtually no migrants. So don't imagine that this was somebody else's fault. This is our fault. We have allowed our governments to shred anything and everything that was good about our country. And don't even get me started on what was bad. Thanks, Rolf, in Bermuda. Now, you've been really generous again this week. So tonight's top donors are only the tip of the iceberg. But they've been onto the MOATS.tv website and they've been the top donors. Stephen Braithwaite, Gary Westhead, Anthony Morgan, Reg Mayer, and a big thank you to regular monthly donor Po Tham. You can scan the QR code now to donate, even if it's just £1, €1, or $1. Please do it. Morris is in California and he wants to talk about America. Go ahead, Morris.
Hello, everybody. This is the sound of my voice. I'd like to apologize to everybody. Please, everybody. America is not the country it used to be. On behalf of all Americans, I want to apologize to you. Do you know what's going on in my country? I don't recognize them. Our citizens are at risk of punitive actions from our government. All right? The rule of law has been abandoned in America. Criminality is being rewarded. Our public officials are being assassinated, George. Their homes are being burned, and they're being illegally arrested. I don't recognize my country. How Mr. Trump got into office, I guess his voter suppression helped him out quite a bit, and the APAC helped him out quite a bit. It's just a sad commentary. We don't all think like our government. We're powerless people in America. We're not supporting this government, but we all look bad. You say, I'm an American. Well, you look bad, man. But we ain't all like that, George. And please understand that we're not all like Mr. Trump. We're not all MAGA. We're not all racist. We're not all bitter. We're loving people. We just don't have the power we once had. And again, the purpose of this call is I want to apologize on behalf of all American people. We're not like what you're seeing from our government. Thank you, George.
Well, I think that's a very beautiful expression of that blatant truth. I myself have traveled the length and breadth of the United States. I've spoken in dozens of states of the Union, and I have known and loved many Americans. They are not the ugliness that we see rolled out first across the world and now, as you rightly say, increasingly across your own country, riding roughshod, the National Guard, though I must say they look like they'd eaten a pastry-based product or two. I called them gravy seals, jumping out of the back of a truck was apparently the Texas National Guard, which has apparently been deployed to Chicago. There's obviously nothing to police in Texas, but as they jumped out of the truck, well, let's just put it this way: there was a lot of weight hanging the wrong way, and they were more like the green buffet than the green beret. So your own freedoms are being trashed, just as your country has trashed the freedoms of so many other countries around the world. And yet the good-naturedness, the good-heartedness, the cheerful can-do-ness of the great American people remains uppermost in my mind. You deserve better than what you've got, Morris. And it's up to you to fix it, because there ain't nobody else can change your government. Now look, coming up this weekend is an amazing thing. The London National Demo. Join our block, the One State Palestine block, at 11:30 on Saturday, 11th October. Saturday, 11th of October, 11:30 at the Victoria Embankment Gardens. The message is: demand military intervention now. We're beyond ceasefires. Frankly, we're beyond ceasefires. We're beyond demands to stop selling weapons or recognition. We need the United Nations Security Council to agree, and if it will not agree, then a coalition of the willing to physically, kinetically intervene to save the captive Palestinians from absolute genocide and Holocaust. That's what we need now. That's our demand. London National Demo, 11:30, Saturday at Victoria Embankment Gardens. Please be there if you possibly can. The one and only Hoz is getting back to his feet after a 2-day operation on his back. He'll soon be, I hope, taking his place in the front rank of the Workers' Party again. But he's here on the line. He's never off the line. He's making videos morning, noon and night, even from his bed in traction. Hoz, what have you got for us?
George, I just wanted to actually talk to you about America a little bit, if I may. And I am, as you know, I'm very keen on everything that's happening over there. And what I can say to you is that Israel has absolutely lost it. They've lost the people. They've lost the young or the old and whatever else. It's pretty much across most metrics. The Israeli side of the argument, which was something that was rock solid for decades, has gone out of the window. And what I wanted to say was, I can only see it going one way and one way only, and that is Thomas Massey's going to win his seat handsomely, and it's going to give courage to other people to do the same thing. And I want to see Israel basically put in the bin while it behaves like an animal, and the concept of kinetic energy being applied against them. I don't want that applied against their population. I only want it against one thing and one thing only: their capacity to manage and continue with the starvation and the genocide of the people of Gaza. I don't wish any ill will or any harm to them, and I think it's important. It's really important that Israel understands, if you want to be part of the international world order and be part of humanity, you can't kill people the way you're killing them in Gaza. You can't just shoot doctors in the head because you've got an opportunity to, because the gap is right, and murder a doctor or a nurse, which is what happened a few days ago. It's just, I could go on and on, but all I'm saying is I am very happy to see that Israel has lost its place in the world global order. It's a pariah state, and the only people that like them, literally the only people that like them, are the people who are their servants in Whitehall, in Berlin, in France, the people who are too scared to open their mouth up, because the nations of Europe and America have all turned against Israel. It is a absolute pariah state, and they brought it onto themselves. No one forced them to murder people. That's the way they are. That's the way they should get treated.
It's a pariah state that is now finally being treated as a pariah. They'll be kicked out of the Eurovision Song Contest. Not much of a punishment, I must say, but it looks certain now. Virtually every country in the world has recognized the Palestinian state, which, whether they like it or not, will change the terms of their legal position vis-a-vis the murdering of Palestinians. After all, if you actually recognize a state whose people are being slaughtered by another country that you recognize, it will be more difficult for the recognizing countries simply to ignore that, and will leave them open to greater legal challenge and scrutiny for having done so in the past. The American one is the big enchilada. I mean, back in 1975, when I first took up this issue, I never imagined that the day would come when the United States would be moving like a tidal wave against Netanyahu and against Israel. And they're throwing money like confetti at influencers and so on, but that's only demonstrating their own weakness and their own desperation. As I pointed out earlier with Chris Hedges, have a bit of decorum. Don't give 150 million to a nobody and say you're now running CBS and you're going to run it one way only, and expect that people are going to turn up at CBS. CBS's numbers are already at rock bottom, and they are headed downwards under the new regime. And the same will happen to CNN, and I hope the same will happen to TikTok. It's wide open, Hawes, for a new, neutral TikTok in the United States. I hope someone with money does it. Thanks for your call. It is the last call because my good wife Gayatri is in the other studio with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
I want to start tonight with a tribute to our all-time hero, the true soldier in the everlasting struggle against imperialism across the world, Comandante Che Guevara. On this day, 8th of October 1967, was captured in Bolivia by the US-backed Bolivian army. As he was leading a guerrilla insurgency there, he was then held prisoner, interrogated, and tortured. And the next day, they took him to a small schoolhouse in the village of La Higuera, where he was tied to a pole, blindfolded, which he refused. And he looked the sergeants in the eye and he said, "I know you've come to kill me. Shoot me. You know, you're only going to kill a man." And there he lies in the hospital. He was put on display for the public and press to see. Iconic as this picture is, and iconic as he became, Jesus-like, lying there in front of everyone, age 39. His life ended there and then, but his mission, his revolution, lives on until today. He's the one who said, if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. And we are comrades of Comandante Che Guevara. I want to pass on to you.
Well, of course, I agree with everything that you said, and I can sense your emotion. I feel it every year on this day. I consider myself a soldier in his army, and one of those who rushed to pick up his weapon when he fell. In this case, a microphone and a pen and a political voice. And his image is everywhere that freedom is being fought for, and in those places where freedom has been won. His image is simply ubiquitous. And they made a very big mistake in publishing those photographs of the martyr Che Guevara because they were intended to prove that he was dead. They were intended to prove that he was no more. But of course, they served only to prove that Che Guevara lives. He lives on every barricade. He lives in every barrio. He lives in every slum. He lives in every struggle, in every fight. He lives. Che Guevara lives and will live forever. Thank you, Gayatri. Have you got anything more, or shall we close the show there?
Well, I just want to remind you, of course, he was born in Argentina, but he's most known for his part in the Cuban Revolution. But he traveled across the globe, across Latin America, Africa, the Congo, Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Algeria. Most importantly, he also visited Gaza with Gamal Abdel Nasser. And so he was with this struggle all the way back then. That's how long it went. And I just want to conclude with a quote that his father said about him. He said, "The first thing to note is that my son's veins flowed the blood of the Irish rebels." Because, of course, Che's mother, her ancestry came from Ireland. That's why he was named Lynch. And speaking of these Irish rebels, tonight we had one on the show. And we've received so many comments on Tadhg's contribution. And it was a very emotional contribution, which I'm sure touched all of us.
Indeed, we're all feeling emotional tonight for one reason or another, although essentially the reason is always the same. Thank you, Gayatri, for that. We'll be back, God willing, with the Sunday show at the same time, in the same places. Our numbers are rising exponentially. That's why they're doing their best to stop us, but they will never succeed. We will continue as long as we live to speak this truth, and after us will come many, many others. So thanks for watching. An auspicious show, I think. And here's to Tadhg Hickey and the other veterans of the flotilla that headed to Gaza into the guns and lived to tell the tale, God willing.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.